Chapter 4. Set and the Rule of the Gods. After Khastran's death, the Creator had become aware of the mystic realm and tried to dismantle it. Unfortunately, however, his attempts to do so backfired, literally, and wounded him to such an extent that he was unable to hold off the Destroyer, who returned to our Omniverse properly. The Creator's dark twin decimated thousands of universes and visited untold horrors upon others. Set, who belonged to one of the most powerful races of gods, was among those who attempted to provide aid to one of the realities that the Destroyer had devastated. What Set saw, however, drove him mad. He became convinced that the Creator was completely evil, because the Destroyer had come from him. Sadly, however, in time, this led Set to believe that all life in the Omniverse was evil, as it was the creation of the Creator, when he and the Destroyer were one. Meanwhile, the Creator was able to finally banish the Destroyer from his reality once he had recovered, and end the war, at least for many hundreds of thousands of years. Even in his weakened condition, the Creator devised another realm disconnected from ours that he was able to throw the Destroyer into and seal, ironically using the same means as the force field the Destroyer placed around the monster's realm. The Creator, however, was also forced to sacrifice himself in the process, as he had to remain trapped within this realm in order to hold the Destroyer there, whilst his followers placed a force field around it. For the next several 100,000 years, the Creator and the Destroyer remained trapped in this realm together, constantly at each other's throats. Our Omniverse was safe from both, and seemingly anything else in the void, as just before his departure, the Creator also had the goblins place another force field around the entire Omniverse to prevent any other great power from infiltrating it. This force field, however, would prove to be more unstable, as it was largely the invention of the goblins themselves rather than the Creator. At least one group of the Destroyer's monsters was able to enter our Omniverse, who have since spread out across many realms and have remained. Due to being able to multiply their forces with magic, it's doubtful we will ever be rid of these monsters. One such device, designed to multiply monsters, that was created on our Earth was Stonehenge, though its power to create new members of their kind was ultimately undone, ironically, by the benevolent monster Claudia McGrath. Still, for the most part, the force field did its job, but sadly, that did not mean that we were safe. Set became convinced that he had to destroy all of the Creator's children before finding and destroying both the Creator and the Destroyer to protect all other life forms in the void from them. The renegade god found a way to absorb the life essence from other gods, which over time granted him virtually limitless strength. Indeed, not since Khastran himself had one of the Creator's children been so powerful. Set ravaged thousands of realities in the godly realm, before the combined might of the gods drove him from it. Still, he continued his war against other realms, until eventually Set stumbled upon our world. Confused by the power source he could sense from our world, in reality the mystic realm, Set, like Khastran before him, decided to investigate our planet, rather than simply destroy it. His experiments completely unraveled the natural order of the Earth, however. Set knew that he couldn't find this strange power, whatever it was, by simply ripping the Earth apart. Instead, he would have to dig deeper and try and tear through the natural realm itself to find the portal. Whilst the overall structure of the planet Earth remained intact, its creatures, for the most part, were twisted into monsters and abominations. The dead rose, people went insane and killed their loved ones. The lands became inherently hostile places where people's worst nightmares became a reality, all thanks to Set's experiments. Still, Set's fascination with our planet ultimately brought about his downfall. The gods, angels, demons, and most powerful and advanced creatures from numerous different realms, who had all united against him, were given time by his experiments on Earth to create a weapon that could harm him. Unfortunately, however, none of them were able to get close enough to use it, but one of the surviving dragons on the earth, who Set had dismissed as a simple beast, slipped by the insane god and was given the weapon by the allied creatures. Even the dragon, however, knew that if it got near Set on Earth, he would simply vaporize it. Instead, the dragon needed to find a creature that Set truly would regard as nothing more than an insect that he didn't need to swat. And so, it chose a powerful human warrior who struck Set when he wasn't even looking. The weapon took the form of a sword for the human to wield it. The human in question we would come to know as Leontine one day. She was a vampire killer who back in the Lost Years had managed to steal the Book of Khastran from the vampires. She gave it to a witch who hoped to use the book to destroy the vampire horde for good. Sadly, that was not possible, but she did harness the energy in the book to create several creatures and warriors to fight the vampires. The most successful of these were arguably the Kresniks. They were humans who had the power to kill vampires using any weapon regardless of their weaknesses, as well as the ability to detect any vampire regardless of whether it was in its human form or not. Finally, they also possessed shape-shifting abilities. Other than these powers, however, the Kresniks were still completely human, and they could only create other members of their kind through mating with humans. Leontine, meanwhile, became the witch's greatest individual warrior. The Book of Khastran granted Leontine great healing abilities and immortality, though her body could still die if the wounds were too severe, such as decapitation. Still, Leontine's soul would then be transplanted into another body instantly, one that had recently died and whose soul had moved on. Said body would then be revived and restored for Leontine's spirit to inhabit, and granted her healing powers and immortality. Though the body's appearance did not change to match Leontine, the vampire killer's memories, personality, and consciousness, all of which came from the soul, were completely unaffected or unchanged from body to body. Per her wishes, Leontine would only be granted eternal rest when the vampires were gone from the earth. She hated the vampire race, quite unlike anyone else, and genuinely did not want to rest until they were wiped out. Sadly, most of the details of Leontine's life remain shrouded in mystery, including her real name. Leontine was simply an alias she assumed sometime in the 17th century. It is believed to have come from her latest host's body, and she evidently liked it enough to make that her permanent name. It's not known how many bodies she has had, but it is likely in the thousands. Still, whilst much of her life may elude us, it is safe to say that no individual has done more to protect us from the threat of the vampires than Leontine, though even with her countless battles against the undead, her defeat of Set was arguably her greatest achievement. When she wounded Set with the sword, he instantly vaporized her too, but once again, only her latest body was destroyed, and she was instantly revived. Set's wound finally made him vulnerable enough for the combined forces of the gods, angels, and demons to destroy the insane god. Following Set's death, some of the surviving gods came to settle on the earth. They did so first because they wanted to help our planet that was still twisted after Set's rampage. Whilst not all of the gods were kind and benevolent, the state of the earth was so horrific and desolate that even the most callous gods took pity on us. In addition to this, however, many of these gods' home planets had been destroyed by Set too. Finally, several of the gods also wanted to see what it was about this planet that had made it stand out for Set, and indeed Khastran as well. Khastran had never revealed why he was on the earth, of course, but the gods always wondered what had lured him out. The gods, who rebuilt the earth, who came from multiple planets, grouped together into different pantheons and settled in different locations around the restored earth. Among these included the Olympians, who settled in Greece, the last inhabitants of the planet Valhalla, who settled in Norway, and the last of Set's own people, the Assyrians, who settled in Egypt. As these gods had essentially rebuilt the earth, the humans believed that they were the creators of our world, a lie which the gods were only too happy to perpetuate. To be fair to the gods, however, their reign over our earth, whilst having its own difficulties, would nevertheless aid humanity greatly, even beyond simply saving us from Set's attack. According to Leontine, just before Set's invasion, the vampires were winning their war, not so much through their ingenuity, but through the fact that even the iron will of humanity wasn't able to stand against so many obstacles, from hundreds of demon species, a depleted population, and a dying planet. Ironically, had Set not shown up, then the vampires would have most likely killed us off. Thanks to the gods, however, humanity, in its rebuilt Earth, flourished and prospered, with our population exploding like never before. Whilst the gods did limit humanity in terms of their magics and even technology, so that we would not outgrow them, overall, it's fair to say that without the gods, we would not be here. Not only did they save us, but the worship of these creatures laid the very foundations of our earliest societies. Sadly, however, some of the gods did become corrupted by the power they had over these mere mortals, and there would also be 2 huge global wars fought during the gods' rule over the earth. The first was between the gods and the dragons. Though key allies in the fight against Set, and both had even helped in the rebuilding of the earth, with the dragon's role often being overlooked, they had 2 very different ideas on how to guide humanity. The dragons favoured teaching humanity magic, and allowing them to become strong enough to defend themselves from any future threat. The gods, however, argued that hadn't worked before, and that humanity may very well destroy itself in its current state if given that kind of power. The dragons, meanwhile, believed that the gods simply did not want humanity to ever not be dependent on them, which led to the clash. The gods ultimately prevailed in Europe and the West, whilst in mainland China and the East, the dragons triumphed and came to rule. During the course of their war, the dragons brought many more species of dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures back with magic to transform into other members of their kind and allies. These prehistoric creatures were placed in small, isolated valleys and islands around the world, which were protected and shielded by magic. There, the dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures could breed in sustainable numbers to supply the dragons with a constant supply of soldiers. Wyverns were the magical counterparts to the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles who lived during the age of the dinosaurs. Drakes were the magical counterparts to synapsids. Worms, meanwhile, were the magical counterparts to titanoboas, and finally, amphitheres were the magical counterpart to prehistoric birds. The gods and the dragons did eventually call a truce, agreeing to stay out of each other's territories. In spite of this, however, conflicts continued right the way through the gods' and the dragons' rule over the earth. Many renegade dragons also fled to Europe as well, which, coupled with the gods' propaganda, led to the dragons being seen as evil, corrupt, and greedy creatures in the West, whilst in the East they were worshipped and revered as much as our gods were. In China, many great magical kingdoms were created by the dragons, including, most notably, the land of Shambhala, where the great hero that we would know as Professor Fang was born. Professor Fang arguably became the universe's greatest hero, with his actions in the war for creation alone ensuring our very existence. If nothing else, through the birth of Professor Fang alone, the dragons left behind a huge legacy on this earth, though we will be exploring the life or unlife of this vampire in a later chapter. The second war, meanwhile, was with Ares, the son of Zeus, who sought to turn humanity into a warrior race he could conquer the galaxy with. Ares argued that it was the only way for humanity to protect itself, but in truth, he felt it was a better way of protecting himself. The war with Ares eventually led to an event known as the Great Flood that was caused by a botched attempt from one of Ares' minions to kill Poseidon. In the end, the gods were able to drive Ares from the planet, but afterwards they and the dragons finally agreed to leave the Earth. Both parties felt they had caused more harm than good in the long run, with humanity having become completely dependent on them both. The dragons' attempt to build a perfect magical civilization that covered their entire territory, meanwhile, had also been met with failure every single time, with each society either collapsing or isolating itself. The dragons conceded that the gods were right, that humanity simply wasn't ready for this kind of power, whilst the gods admitted that the dragons were right, that they wanted humanity not to advance and remain dependent on them. Both species, during the course of their rule, had also discovered the secret of the mystic realm, which had very nearly led to another clash simply over what to do with it. Some radical gods even argued destroying the portal and the earth with it to protect the rest of creation. Thankfully for us, however, both species leaders ultimately agreed not to harness it, feeling that this kind of power would corrupt anyone. Now that both were leaving, however, the dragons and gods decided to place agents and warning systems on the earth in case the mystic realm was ever breached. Sadly, however, over the centuries, most but not all of the gods' agents died, and the gods and dragons themselves would eventually split up, be killed in other conflicts, etc., leaving our planet once again vulnerable. Still, at the same time, the gods and dragons had created a fail-safe in case their soldiers were ever disposed of, just before they left the Earth. Using all of their resources, the dragons and the gods created multiple copies of our solar system in every single universe in the natural realm. Contrary to popular belief, no universe within the natural realm is a copy of another. Every single universe's history is completely unique. As a result of this, the gods and the dragons created copies of our world in order to confuse any other life forms who may be drawn to the mystic realm's power. Whilst the mystic realm could not be accessed from any of these other Earths, they were still linked to it in such a way that it could be confusing to most creatures. Most of the other Earth's histories followed on from the point just after the gods left, though some of their histories started from an earlier period of Earth's life, with subsequent events turning out differently if so. One Earth even went back to the age of the dinosaurs, whilst others muddled periods of Earth's history up due to the unstable nature of the magics used to create them. For instance, one Earth's history began with humans and dinosaurs living together. No gods were duplicated on these other worlds, and also no creatures, such as Khastran, could be duplicated either. Still, vampires did exist on many of them, but as they were not created directly by Khastran, then even if they overran their versions of the Earth, it would still not revive him. Similarly, some leftover magics and weapons from the gods were also duplicated too. At some point after the gods and the dragons left our planet, our official recorded history begins. The worship of the gods and dragons, meanwhile, did still continue for many thousands of years after they left, with some believing that they could still hear our prayers from across the Omniverse. In the next article, we will explore our recorded history from the early days of the Roman Empire and its dealings with the paranormal.